I'm your host, and today we're diving into something that thousands of advanced learners around the world have been asking for a long form: natural, real-life English listening experience designed specifically for C2 level fluency. If you've made it to this level, first of all, congratulations. You've already climbed the mountain most people never reach, but you're here because you want something more nuance, more natural rhythm, more control, and above all, a deeper sense of comfort with English. And trust me, that next jump from excellent English to effortless English is absolutely possible, but it requires the kind of input we're going to give you today: real, unscripted style conversation, natural expressions, everyday phrasing, and those subtle details native speakers use without thinking. And joining me today is someone who knows exactly how to bring those details to life: a fellow teacher, a pronunciation nerd, and someone who spends way too much time analyzing how real people speak. Welcome to the show. Thank you. It's great to be here. And I honestly love doing episodes like this because C2 learners are in such an interesting place. They can understand almost everything, but they often tell us the same thing: I still don't feel completely natural. Or sometimes I hesitate because something doesn't sound quite right. Or my personal favorite: I understand everything, but I don't always sound like the people I listen to. Exactly. And that's actually what today's episode is built around: closing that final 10% gap. Because when learners hit C2, it's not about basic grammar anymore. It's not about memorizing vocabulary lists. And it's definitely not about drilling boring exercises. It's about exposing yourself to real language patterns: the rhythm, the flow, the tone, the tiny emotional shifts hidden inside everyday expressions. Right. And before we go deeper, I want to say something that I tell my advanced students all the time. English at the highest level is not about perfection. It's about naturalness. It's about choosing phrases that fit the moment. It's about sounding calm, confident, spontaneous, not rehearsed. And the only way you build that is through listening to authentic, conversational English, which is exactly what we're doing for the next 100 minutes. So let's start with something simple and universal: the idea of comfort and confidence in English. A lot of C2 learners feel confident intellectually, but not emotionally. They know the grammar, they know the vocabulary, but they sometimes second-guess themselves when speaking. They're afraid of sounding too formal, or too stiff, or too textbook. I hear this all the time. Someone says, "I speak well, but I don't feel like myself in English." And that's such an important point. You want your English self to feel like your real self: relaxed, expressive, funny, thoughtful, curious. So here's a little mindset shift that helps. Instead of thinking, "How can I avoid mistakes?" ask, "How can I express myself more naturally?" Exactly. And natural English often comes from small, everyday expressions, the ones people don't teach you in textbooks. Things like, "I get what you mean. I see where you're coming from. That caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting that. That's a good call. Let me think this through." These aren't fancy phrases. They aren't idioms from a dictionary. They're just the real language you hear native speakers use constantly, whether they're at work, out with friends, or just chatting casually. Absolutely. And today, as we go through different topics: daily life, communication, culture, decisions, emotions, work, relationships, preferences, you're going to hear these kinds of phrases repeated naturally, in context, in conversation. That's the magic. Your brain picks up patterns without you forcing it. And speaking of daily life, let's kick things off with something everyone can relate to: the routines we build and the habits we try to keep. Because how people talk about their routines often reveals a lot about natural English. Yeah, let's start there. You know how people say things like, "I've been trying to get into a better morning routine." I'm not a morning person, but I'm working on it. I've been meaning to start exercising again. I keep telling myself I'll go to bed earlier, but here we are. These are the kinds of lines you hear everywhere at work, in coffee shops, at the gym, even in casual conversations with friends. And they speak to something universal. Everyone is trying to improve something in their life, but not always successfully. And the way native speakers talk about that is casual, self-aware, and often a little humorous. Right. No one says, I intend to restructure my morning routine for improved productivity. That sounds like a robot. They say things like, I'm trying to get my life together. I'm slowly getting back on track. I'm doing my best, but it's a work in progress. That one, it's a work in progress, is extremely common. People use it for everything: their health, their job, their personal goals, even their relationships. Exactly. And it's phrases like this that make your English feel authentic, not academic, not formal, just real. So here's what we're going to do throughout this episode. We're going to explore these expressions in natural conversation. We're going to show you how native speakers actually use them, and you're going to hear them again and again, not in a memorization way, but in a natural exposure way. Right. And remember, the goal today isn't to understand every single word. The goal is to absorb patterns, the way thoughts flow, the way ideas connect, the way tone changes depending on the moment. So with that said, let's ease into our first real conversation of the episode, talking about daily routines, morning habits, and the small rituals that shape our day. Because honestly, how someone starts their day says a lot about them. So let's talk about mornings, not in a dramatic way, but in the real life, everyday sense. Everyone has a different relationship with mornings. Some people wake up ready to conquer the world, while others wake up and immediately start negotiating with themselves about getting out of bed. Absolutely. And what's funny is that people love talking about their morning routines, even people who don't really have one. You'll hear things like, I'm trying to be more consistent. Some days I'm on top of things, some days not so much. I wish I were one of those early riser people. Exactly. And those expressions, on top of things, not so much. Early riser people, these aren't textbook expressions. They're the kinds of casual, natural phrases you hear in everyday conversations. Let's paint a realistic picture. Imagine you're having coffee with a friend before work. You ask how their morning's going, and you hear something like, well, I woke up on time, which is already a win for me. But then I got distracted scrolling on my phone, and suddenly half an hour disappeared. Every native speaker knows that feeling time just evaporates. Exactly. Or you hear someone say, I was doing great, and then I remembered I forgot to set the dishwasher last night, so now my whole morning feels off. That phrase, my whole morning feels off, is very native. It means something feels a little wrong, a little out of rhythm, even if nothing dramatic happened. And it shows how much language is built around these subtle emotional states. People rarely say, my morning was inefficient due to unexpected circumstances. They say, it just threw me off. I lost my rhythm. I got sidetracked. I was all over the place. These are incredibly common expressions that advanced learners need to hear in real context. You know what else is super common? When people talk about trying to build healthy habits, you hear things like, I'm trying to drink more water. I'm trying to cut back on coffee, but it's not going well. I told myself I'd go for a run this morning. Spoiler alert, I didn't. Yes, spoiler alert is very natural, very conversational. It's playful. And that's a big part of sounding native, learning how humor appears in regular speech. Right. Most humor is not jokes. It's tone, it's timing, it's self-awareness. It's little lines like, I had every intention of being productive today. And then reality hit. I blinked and somehow it was lunchtime. Today has already gotten away from me. These expressions are everyday English gold for C2 learners. You know what's interesting? When we talk about daily routines, we're not just talking about schedules, we're talking about identity. People describe themselves through their habits. I'm a slow starter. I'm a night owl. I'm not fully human until my first cup of coffee. And these statements sound simple, but they're rich with natural phrasing. Exactly. And when you want to sound native, one of the best things you can do is observe how people describe themselves. It's rarely direct. It's usually playful or metaphorical. For example, I function at about 40% in the morning. I'm not built for early mornings. My brain takes a while to boot up. These expressions are extremely familiar to native speakers. I love that last one, boot up. It's a fun way to compare your brain to a computer, and metaphors like that are all over English, especially casual conversation. Exactly, they make the language feel alive. Okay, let's shift the conversation a little. We've talked about mornings and routines, but let's move into something connected to it, motivation. Because the way people talk about motivation in English is very specific and very informal. So true. People rarely say, my motivation levels fluctuate depending on external variables. They say, I'm trying to get my act together. I'm not as motivated as I'd like to be. I'm working on it. Slowly. I can't seem to get into the right headspace. These lines show emotion, not just information. Exactly. And here's a phrase every English learner should know because it's everywhere. I'm doing my best. It's simple, but it's powerful. It's flexible. You can use it whether you're talking about work, health, habits, relationships, anything. Another universal one is, I'm trying to find my balance. That's one of those phrases that can mean so many things, depending on tone and context. Yes, it's not about physical balance. It's about emotional or mental stability, finding a healthy rhythm between all the things you're juggling in life. Speaking of juggling, that's another everyday expression. People say, I'm juggling a lot right now. I've got a lot on my plate. I'm trying to keep everything together. These expressions help you sound sensitive, human, relatable. And that's what advanced English is about, not sounding perfect, but sounding real. Exactly. And the best way to build that is through exposure to natural conversation. Not scripted textbook dialogues, not artificial practice conversations, but the real rhythm of how people speak when they're just being themselves. Okay, so let's build on this and move into something deeper, how people talk about stress and trying to manage it. Because this is another universal topic, and the English expressions around it are incredibly valuable for advanced learners. Yes, that's a great direction. Stress touches everyone. People talk about work, stress, life stress, emotional stress, even social stress. And the way they describe it reveals a lot of natural phrasing. Right, you'll hear people say, I've been feeling a bit overwhelmed. I'm stretched pretty thin right now. I'm trying not to burn out. It's been a hectic week. These expressions aren't dramatic. They're everyday. And they're so common that if you start using them naturally, your English level immediately feels more native-like. Exactly. And we'll dig even deeper into this, how people talk about emotions, pressure, relationships, and social interactions, because these are the areas where advanced English really shines. But for now, let's wrap up the morning routine topic, carry our natural phrasing forward, and move into the next section, how people describe pressure, stress, and emotional balance in everyday English. Because trust me, the vocabulary in that area is pure gold. So let's ease into something almost everyone deals with: stress, pressure, mental load, whatever you want to call it. And what's interesting is that native speakers rarely talk about stress in a dramatic or formal way. It's usually subtle, understated, and very conversational. Exactly, and people will say things like, I've got a lot going on right now. I'm feeling a little overwhelmed. I'm running on low battery this week. I'm hanging in there, but it's a lot. Now, notice how none of these sentences use the word stress, yet the meaning is completely clear. Right, and that's why these phrases are so important for C2 learners. Advanced English isn't about complicated vocabulary. It's about sounding human, sounding like someone who lives in the real world, not a language exam. For example, one of the most native expressions ever is, I'm trying to keep my head above water. It just means you're managing, you're coping, you're not drowning in responsibilities, and you'll hear it absolutely everywhere: workplaces, family conversations, chats with friends. And sometimes, stress is described in a slightly humorous way. You might hear someone say, I'm one minor inconvenience away from losing it. I'm at capacity. My brain has left the chat. Yes, that last one, my brain has left the chat, is an internet-influenced expression that's become super common. It's playful, but it also communicates exhaustion in a relatable way. And you know what else is interesting? People often use metaphors to describe their emotional limits. Things like, I'm burned out, I'm drained, I'm fried, I've hit a wall, my brain is fried. These aren't technical terms, they come from real life, and they help you understand the emotional tone of a conversation. Right, and one phrase I hear constantly is, I'm doing my best to stay grounded. That one means you're trying to stay calm, stable, centered even when life feels chaotic. Let's give listeners a quick natural conversation example. Something you might hear between two coworkers or friends. Hey, you doing okay? You seem a little off lately. Yeah, I'm all right. Just juggling too much at the moment. Anything I can help with? Not really, but thanks. I just need to catch my breath. Now that small exchange is packed with native expressions. A little off, juggling too much, catch my breath. These expressions carry emotional meaning without being dramatic. Exactly, and another common one. I just need a minute. It can literally mean 1 minute, or it can mean I need time to calm down. Tone matters more than the actual words. So let's go a bit deeper into the language people use when they're trying to reset, get back on track, or manage stress. You'll often hear, I'm trying to slow down. I need to clear my head. I'm taking things one day at a time. I'm trying to not overthink everything. And that phrase, one day at a time, is universal. It's used in almost every English-speaking country. Right. And it's not just about stress. It's used for anything that feels overwhelming, like a big project, a new job, new responsibilities. It's a comforting, realistic way to express progress without pressure. Another extremely common expression, I'm giving myself some grace. That means you're being gentle with yourself, not expecting perfection. Yes, and that's something a lot of advanced learners actually need to hear. Sometimes they put too much pressure on themselves to speak perfectly. But real English is full of small mistakes, pauses, hesitations, corrections, even for native speakers. Exactly. That's why listening to long-form, human conversations is so important. It helps you understand that English isn't a performance, it's a tool. Let me add one more expression native speakers use constantly. I'm trying to find my rhythm again. It's used when someone feels off balance or out of sync and wants to regain a sense of stability. And that connects naturally to another everyday topic, energy and motivation. People love talking about their energy levels, usually in a joking or self-aware way. You hear lines like, I'm running on fumes, I have zero energy left, I'm wiped out, I'm absolutely done for the day. I hit my limit hours ago. These expressions show exhaustion, but in a light, friendly way. Right. And here's a nuance every advanced learner needs to understand. Native speakers often use exaggeration to make emotions sound relatable, but still casual. For example, I'm exhausted, I'm dead tired, I could sleep for a week. None of these are literal, but everyone understands exactly what they mean. Exactly. And sometimes it's even more dramatic in a humorous way. My social battery is at 1%. I'm emotionally unavailable until I get food. If I don't sleep soon, I'll start malfunctioning. This is the kind of English that comes up in real conversations constantly at work, at school, with friends, in group chats. And speaking of work, let's shift the conversation to how people talk about workload, responsibilities, and workplace stress. Because this is one area where advanced learners often struggle. They know the formal vocabulary, but not the everyday expressions. Exactly. Most learners can say, I have a lot of tasks to complete. But native speakers usually say, I'm swamped. I'm buried in work. I've got deadlines piling up. I'm trying to stay on top of everything. I've got way too much on my plate. These expressions are natural, casual, and extremely common in modern workplaces. Right. And another interesting thing is how people talk about productivity. The language is always emotional, not technical. You never hear someone say, my productivity levels were suboptimal today. They say, I couldn't focus. I kept getting distracted. I wasn't feeling it today. My brain refused to cooperate. I got nothing done. Yes, that last one is one of the most common phrases you'll hear in offices. Okay, let's continue this trajectory and move into an even more nuanced topic, how people talk about boundaries and personal space in everyday English. Because these phrases are extremely common in the US, UK, Canada, Australia, basically every major English-speaking country. And the expressions used around boundaries are some of the most useful ones for C2 learners, because they show emotional intelligence and social awareness. Absolutely, Asa, we'll get into that next. But before we transition, let's summarize the key takeaway from this section. Native speakers talk about stress using metaphors, understatement, humor, and emotional nuance, not formal language. And if you start using those patterns yourself, you instantly sound more natural. All right, let's move into boundaries, communication, and emotional space, another area where advanced English really shines. So let's move into something a lot of people struggle with: boundaries, communication, and emotional space. These are topics native speakers talk about all the time, especially in modern workplaces. Friendships, relationships, and even casual conversations. And the language people use is incredibly natural, incredibly common, and incredibly useful for anyone at the C2 level. Absolutely. What's funny is that most learners don't really learn this kind of language in school. You learn how to talk about your job, your hobbies, maybe your family, but not how to say I need space, or I'm not comfortable with that, or that doesn't work for me. And yet, these are expressions you hear constantly in real life. Right. And boundaries don't have to be dramatic. They can be completely normal. For example, here are some everyday native phrases you'll hear constantly. I need some time to myself. I'm not in the right headspace for that right now. I appreciate the offer, but I'm gonna pass. That feels like a bit too much for me. I'm trying to protect my peace. That last one, protect my peace, is extremely modern and used everywhere, especially in the US. It basically means keeping your emotional state calm and stable. And it's interesting how soft and gentle these boundary expressions are. Native speakers rarely say something like, I do not want to engage in that activity. Instead, they say, that's not really my thing. I'm going to sit this one out. I think I'll skip this time. That doesn't work for me. Yes, that doesn't work for me is one of the most versatile, polite boundary phrases in English. You can use it for scheduling, for work tasks, for social plans, for anything that doesn't align with your needs. Let's give a realistic example. Hey, we're all going out after work. You in, I'd love to, but I need to recharge tonight. Totally get it. Next time. Now notice the language. I need to recharge. It means you need rest, physical, emotional, or social. Native speakers use this constantly. Exactly. And here's another one: I need a little breathing room. That's a very gentle way of saying you need space, either literally or emotionally. Another one you'll hear all the time: I'm setting some boundaries for myself. It means you're trying to be healthier, calmer, more balanced, and you're letting people know. Now let's talk about communication, especially when you need to be honest, but still kind. This is a huge part of real-life English that advanced learners absolutely need. Native speakers often use softening phrases, things that make a message sound less harsh. For example, I might be wrong, but from what I can tell, I'm not sure how to put this, but can I be honest with you for a second? Here's how I'm seeing it. These expressions show emotional intelligence. They also create space for honest conversation. Right, and here's another important one. That made me feel a bit uncomfortable. This is a direct but respectful way to express your feelings, and it's extremely common in both professional and personal contexts. And you'll also hear, I'd prefer if we didn't go in that direction. I'm not sure that tone is helpful right now. I need a minute to process that. Again, these expressions show emotional awareness, sensitivity, and social understanding. Exactly. And here's something crucial: native speakers often use tone and phrasing to express nuance, not just vocabulary. That's why advanced learners benefit so much from long-form listening like this. You start to understand how meaning changes depending on rhythm, softness, pauses. Now, let's switch into a related but slightly lighter area: how people talk about social energy and social preferences. Because in modern English-speaking cultures, people talk all the time about needing space, avoiding crowded events, managing their energy, balancing social time with rest, and so on. You hear things like, my social battery is running low. I'm not really in a social mood today. I love hanging out, but I need downtime afterward. I get overwhelmed in big groups. I'm more of a small group person. And these aren't confessions or weaknesses, they're just normal descriptions of personal preferences. Right. And notice how natural these expressions are. They're relatable, soft, familiar. They don't sound dramatic or formal. They sound like real people describing real life. Another incredibly common line is, I'm trying to find the right balance. We talked about balance earlier, but here it specifically refers to managing social needs. People use it constantly. Let's give another realistic mini dialogue. You come into the party tonight. I think I'm going to stay home. I've had a long week. No worries. Rest up. Yeah, I just need a quiet night. This dialogue is super simple, super natural, and filled with native phrasing. Now let's take this deeper. Boundaries and emotional space also show up in relationships and friendships. People say things like, I need to take a step back. I'm not in the best place emotionally. I need to set healthier limits. I care, but I also need some space. I don't have the capacity for this right now. These expressions are polite but real. They let you communicate clearly without being harsh. And this is incredibly important for advanced learners. If you can express emotional nuance in English, you're not just fluent, you're socially fluent. Now, let's shift into a new area that builds on this: how people describe their preferences, decisions, and personal choices. This is another area packed with natural language, especially expressions about liking or disliking things, making choices, hesitating, or changing your mind. We'll get into all of that next, because the vocabulary around decisions is extremely rich and extremely everyday. But before we transition, here's the takeaway. Advanced English lives in the soft language phrases that show emotion, boundaries, preferences, hesitation, tone, and connection. And if you can master that, you unlock a whole new level of natural fluency. All right, let's move into how native speakers talk about preferences, decisions, and personal tastes, some of the most useful everyday expressions at the C2 level. So now let's talk about something every native speaker deals with constantly: preferences and decision making. This is a goldmine of natural English because people express likes, dislikes, uncertainty, hesitation, and personal taste dozens of times a day. And the way they talk about it is almost never direct or formal. Exactly. When someone asks a native speaker what they prefer, the answer is rarely a simple yes or no. Instead, you get phrases that reveal personality, confidence, indecision, politeness, or all of the above. For example, I'm not picky, but I do have preferences. I'm flexible, whatever works for you. I'm not crazy about that idea. I could go either way. I'm leaning toward this one. These expressions feel natural and conversational. They're the language of everyday choices: what to eat, where to go, whether to join a plan, how you feel about an option. Right. And one of the most common expressions you'll ever hear is, I'm not sure yet, I'm still thinking it through. It's gentle, honest, and extremely common. Another one you hear all the time: let me sleep on it. Meaning, let me decide tomorrow. Let me think about it after resting. Yes. And here's a very native expression related to hesitation: I'm on the fence. This means you haven't decided yet, you're in the middle. And the beautiful thing about this expression is that it's universal. You can use it in work decisions, personal decisions, even small choices like what to order. Exactly. Now let's move into how native speakers express strong preferences without sounding too direct. For example, I'm really into this. I'm a huge fan of that. That's totally my thing. That doesn't really do it for me. I'm not big on that. These expressions are extremely common and they sound friendly, not aggressive. Yes, and look at how many ways English has to say, I don't like this, without saying those exact words. I'm not big on it. It's not really my vibe. It's not my cup of tea. I'm not sold on it. It's not quite what I'm looking for. These are soft, polite, socially aware ways of expressing opinions. Another one I love is, it's growing on me. Meaning at first you didn't like it, but now you're starting to. Exactly. And the opposite is, I'm over it. Meaning you liked it before, but not anymore. Let's give a natural mini dialogue showing these types of expressions. Do you want to watch that new show tonight? I'm on the fence. I'm not sure if it's my vibe. We could try one episode and see. Yeah, why not? Maybe it'll grow on me. Every line in that exchange is something real people say every day. Now let's shift into another major area of natural English: making plans. In English-speaking cultures, plans are rarely decided immediately. There's always negotiation, flexibility, hesitation, and a lot of softening language. Exactly. Here are some of the most common plan-related expressions. Let's play it by ear. Let's see how the day goes. I'll keep you posted. I'll let you know closer to the time. I'm not sure yet, I might have something. These expressions are essential for sounding natural when talking about future plans. And another big one you hear constantly is, sounds good to me. It's friendly, simple, and extremely common. Right. And here's something every C2 learner should know. Native speakers often respond indirectly when they're not fully committed to something. For example, maybe, we'll see. I'll think about it. I'll see how I feel. Let me check my schedule. All of these often mean probably not, but they're polite ways of keeping the conversation open. Exactly. And here's an expression that has become extremely popular in modern English. I'm trying to be more intentional with my time. It means someone is trying to choose activities carefully, not just say yes to everything. Right, and that leads to another super common phrase. I'm trying to prioritize rest, meaning the person is choosing rest over social invitations. Let's illustrate this with another natural dialogue. You want to join us for dinner, thanks. That's really nice of you. But I think I'm staying in tonight. I'm trying to slow down a bit. No worries at all, take care of yourself. Notice the tone: warm, polite, relaxed. No drama, no tension. Now, let's introduce another very common topic in natural English: personal tastes and lifestyle choices. People love talking about their favorite foods, activities, hobbies, and routines. But they rarely talk about them in strict or formal terms. You hear things like, I'm really into cooking lately. I've been getting back into reading. I'm trying to get more active. I got hooked on that series. I'm obsessed with this new cafe. Very conversational, very real. And when people dislike something, the language is casual. I tried it, but it wasn't for me. I'm not feeling it. I couldn't get into it. It didn't click with me. These expressions communicate personal preference gently, without shutting down the conversation. Let's expand into another advanced nuance expressing uncertainty or changing your mind. Native speakers use expressions like, I'm torn. I keep going back and forth. I changed my mind. I talk myself out of it. I talk myself into it. It seemed like a good idea at the time. These are deeply human expressions, full of personality and emotion. Exactly. And they help listeners understand your thought process, which is a huge part of natural communication. Now, before we shift into the next major topic: relationships, connection, and social dynamics, let's summarize. Native speakers rarely give direct yes or no answers. They express preferences softly, emotionally, indirectly, and playfully. Everyday English is full of metaphor, hesitation, humor, and nuance. The language of decisions and preferences is key to sounding natural at the C2 level. And the next section will show you some of the richest natural language in English, how people talk about friendships, connections, interactions, misunderstandings, and communication. This is one of the most important areas for advanced fluency, and we're diving into it next. All right, let's move into one of the richest areas of natural English: relationships, connection, and social dynamics. This is where native speakers use some of their most expressive, nuanced, emotionally intelligent language, the kind of language that rarely shows up in textbooks but appears constantly in real life. Exactly. And what's beautiful about this topic is that everyone can relate to it. Everyone has friendships, family relationships, coworkers, acquaintances, people they get along with, people they struggle with. And the way native speakers talk about those dynamics is full of subtlety and warmth. Let's start with something simple, talking about people you feel comfortable with. Here are some extremely common expressions. I feel like I can be myself around them. They're really easy to talk to. We just click. There's a good vibe between us. They get me. Now notice these aren't formal sentences, they're warm, emotional, natural. Yes, we just click is one of the most powerful expressions in English. It means you get along instantly, effortlessly. And the opposite also exists. We don't really click. Our personalities don't mesh well. The vibe feels off, and there's some tension between us. Again, all extremely common. Right. And I want to highlight something important: vibe has become one of the most used words in modern English. It can refer to a feeling, an atmosphere, a person's energy, a situation, almost anything. You'll hear, it's got a nice vibe. I'm not loving the vibe here. The vibe feels weird today. Very modern, very natural. Now, let's talk about friendships. People describe friends in many ways. They're the kind of person you can rely on. They always show up for me. We go way back. They're my go-to person. We've been through a lot together. Those last two are especially meaningful. Go-to person is the person you turn to for support, advice, or comfort. We've been through a lot together. The relationship has history and depth. Exactly. And relationships aren't always easy, so let's bring in some language around challenges and misunderstandings. Native speakers often soften difficult messages. There's been some miscommunication. I think we're not on the same page. I feel like something's been off lately. I didn't mean for it to come across that way. I think we should talk things through. These expressions let you address issues without sounding aggressive or confrontational. Yes, and one of the most important relationship skills in English-speaking cultures is being able to express disagreement politely. People say, I see where you're coming from, but I hear you, but I see it differently and I get your point, but I don't fully agree. That's a fair point, but here's my take. These lines allow you to stay respectful while still being honest. Right. And another thing native speakers do constantly is use I feel statements. It's a way of expressing emotions without blaming the other person. For example, I feel unheard. I feel overwhelmed. I feel disconnected. I feel like we're misunderstanding each other. Very normal. Very everyday phrasing, especially in the US, Canada, and Australia. Now, let's talk about something fun: meeting new people. People often describe first impressions in natural ways. They seem really genuine. They give off a friendly vibe. They seemed a bit guarded at first. They're easy to be around. They made a really good impression. These are phrases you'll hear constantly in casual conversation. Yes. And here's one of the most universal expressions. They're good people. It's simple, but extremely common, a warm way to describe someone's character. Now, let's move on to something slightly more personal. Talking about emotional needs and communication needs. Native speakers use phrases like, I need a bit more reassurance. I need clearer communication. I need you to be straightforward with me. I need some space to process things. These expressions appear not just in romantic relationships, but with friends, family, coworkers, even group projects. Exactly. And there's a phrase that every C2 learner should know because you hear it constantly. I don't want to make things awkward. This is extremely common when someone wants to have a sensitive conversation, but doesn't want the relationship to feel tense. Now let's explore language around trust and reliability. I trust them completely, and they've never let me down. They're someone I can count on. They follow through on what they say. They keep their word. These are essential expressions in personal and professional contexts. And of course, the opposite also exists. They're a bit unreliable. They mean well, but they don't follow through. They're inconsistent. They're not the easiest person to work with. I'm not sure I can depend on them. Notice how even the negative phrases are gentle. English tends to soften criticism. Exactly. Now, let's add one of the most useful modern phrases. They respect my boundaries. This is extremely important in conversations about emotional health and healthy relationships. Let's put this into a natural dialogue. How's everything going with your new team? Pretty good, actually. Everyone's been really supportive. That's nice to hear. Yeah, the communication is clear and people respect each other's boundaries. That makes such a difference. This conversation is incredibly normal in workplaces around the world. Right. And speaking of workplaces, let's transition into how people talk about collaboration, teamwork, and professional communication. Because the language used at work is often softer, more indirect, more emotionally aware than learners expect. We'll explore phrases around giving feedback, receiving feedback, disagreeing professionally, and navigating tricky conversations. But before we shift into that, here's the takeaway from this section. To sound natural in English, you must be able to talk about relationships, emotions, and connection using soft, subtle, human language. It's one of the pillars of C2 level fluency. All right, next, let's step into the world of workplace communication and the incredibly rich vocabulary that comes with it. Now let's shift into a world that every adult has to navigate workplace communication. And let me tell you, native speakers use some of their most nuanced, polite, indirect, and emotionally intelligent language at work. This is an area where learners often misunderstand or misinterpret tone. So getting familiar with these expressions is essential for true C2 level fluency. Exactly. The workplace is full of subtle language. People don't usually speak directly, especially when discussing problems, disagreements, deadlines, or performance. Instead, they use softer phrasing, collaborative expressions, and indirect suggestions. Let's start with something simple, checking in and confirming understanding. You'll hear things like, just to clarify, can I double check something? Let me make sure I'm understanding you correctly. So what you're saying is, just to confirm, we're on the same page, right? These expressions help avoid misunderstandings and they show professionalism without sounding rigid. And here's one you'll hear constantly in English-speaking workplaces. Does that work for you? It's a polite way to ask whether someone's okay with a plan or schedule. Now let's talk about giving feedback, especially when the feedback is negative. Native speakers almost never say, "This is wrong," or "I don't like this." Instead, they say, "Have you considered trying? One thing we might want to adjust is, it might flow better if we, I think there's room to improve this part. What if we approached it from another angle?" These expressions soften the criticism and make it collaborative. Exactly. And when someone wants to disagree in a meeting, they might say, "I see your point, but I have a slightly different perspective. I hear what you're saying. Though I'm not fully convinced, I'm not sure that's the direction we want to go. I think we might need to rethink this part. I have some concerns about that approach." This way, the disagreement doesn't feel confrontational. One of my favorite workplace expressions is, "Let's circle back to that," meaning let's return to this later without rejecting it. Another one is, "Let's table that for now," which means let's pause this topic for the moment. These phrases are extremely common in meetings in the US and Canada especially. Right. Now let's talk about how people politely ask for help at work. "Could you give me a hand with this? Do you mind taking a quick look? Would you be able to walk me through this? Can you clarify what you meant by that? I could use a second opinion." These expressions show humility and collaboration, two highly valued traits in workplaces. And when someone wants to offer help, you'll hear, "Let me know if you need anything. I'm happy to support however I can. I can take care of that if you'd like. Want me to handle this part? Do you want to tag team this?" Tag team is very natural and means working together on something. Now let's shift into a slightly heavier area, handling pressure. Deadlines and workplace stress. People often use phrases like, "I'm under a lot of pressure right now. I'm juggling a lot of deadlines. I'm feeling stretched pretty thin. I could use more time on this. This week has been non-stop." This kind of language shows vulnerability but also professionalism. Exactly. And when someone wants to request more time without sounding unprepared, they might say, "Is there any flexibility with the deadline? I might need a bit more time to give this my best. I want to make sure the quality is there. Could we extend this slightly?" These are extremely common, especially in remote work environments. Now let's talk about something every worker deals with: meetings. If you want to sound native, here are some expressions you'll hear constantly. Let's jump right in. Before we wrap up, who wants to kick things off? That brings us to the next point, Any updates on this? Let's take this offline. Take this offline means discuss it privately later, not in the meeting. Exactly. And another huge part of workplace culture is managing emotions professionally. When someone is frustrated but trying to stay calm, they might say, I need a moment to process this. I want to make sure I respond thoughtfully. This has been a challenging situation. I'm trying to stay constructive here. And if someone's trying to prevent conflict, let's keep the conversation productive. Let's focus on solutions. I don't want this to turn into a bigger issue. Now let's move into another important area, recognition and appreciation. People don't only criticize, they also acknowledge good work. Common expressions include, great job on this. I really appreciate your work here. You handled that really well. Thanks for stepping up. This wouldn't have happened without you. These expressions help build trust and positive rapport at work. Now, let's combine workplace and personal dynamics because they often overlap. For example, when a coworker seems stressed or upset, people often say, Hey, you okay? You seem a bit off today. If you need to talk, I'm here. Take a breather if you need one. Let me know how I can support you. This kind of caring language is extremely common in modern workplaces. Exactly. And before we transition to the next big topic, let's give a quick workplace-style dialogue. Here's a very natural example. Did you have a chance to look at the proposal? Yes, I went through it this morning. It looks solid, but there are a couple of areas we might tweak. Okay, what are you thinking? I think the introduction needs a bit more clarity. We can walk through it together if you want. Sounds good. Let's circle back after lunch. This simple conversation contains more than a dozen high-frequency native expressions. All right, now let's transition into something equally rich and important. How native speakers talk about self-improvement, goals, habits, and personal growth. Because this is a massive part of modern English, the language people use when trying to better themselves. We'll dive into that next. So let's move into another deeply universal topic, self-improvement, personal growth, and the everyday language people use when talking about trying to become better versions of themselves. This is one of the richest and most relatable areas of natural English because everyone, absolutely, everyone is working on something. Exactly. And the way native speakers talk about self-improvement isn't dramatic or philosophical. It's usually casual, honest, sometimes humorous, sometimes vulnerable. It's the kind of language you hear in cafes, in gym locker rooms, in late-night conversations, or during a walk with a friend. Let's start with some extremely common expressions people use when they're trying to build better habits. I'm trying to get my life together. I'm working on being more consistent. I'm trying to break some old habits. I'm slowly getting into a better routine. It's a work in progress. That last one, it's a work in progress, might be one of the most widely used expressions in English. People say it about everything: their health, their goals, their projects, their mindset, their self-care. It's gentle, realistic, and human. Exactly, and speaking of self-care, let's bring in some language around taking care of yourself physically, mentally, emotionally. You'll hear expressions like, I'm learning to take things slower. I'm trying to be kinder to myself. I'm working on setting healthier boundaries. I'm focusing on what matters. I'm trying not to put too much pressure on myself. These aren't just words, they represent modern communication styles. English-speaking cultures often emphasize mental health and self-awareness, so the language reflects that. Right. And when someone acknowledges they haven't been doing great, they might say, I fell out of my routine. I've been slipping a little bit. I lost momentum. I'm trying to get back on track. I got overwhelmed and hit pause for a while. These phrases express honesty without shame, a very common theme in modern English. Now let's talk about motivation, because this is something people love discussing, even joking about. You'll hear, I'm motivated until I'm not. I go through phases. Some days I'm killing it. Other days I'm barely holding it together. I'm good at starting things, not finishing them. I need a little push sometimes. This is the language of real life, not the polished motivational quotes you find online. And sometimes people use humor to soften the difficulty of self-improvement. I'm trying to get my act together. One tiny step at a time. I'm doing the bare minimum, but at least I'm doing something. I had big plans. But reality said no. I'm trying, but my bet is very persuasive. These expressions are playful, but they communicate real struggles. Exactly. Now let's bring in something deeper, the way people talk about personal identity and long-term growth. You might hear, I'm trying to figure out who I want to be. I'm learning what really matters to me. I'm trying to outgrow old patterns. I'm working on becoming more patient. I'm trying to develop better habits. These statements are vulnerable and reflective, and they show emotional maturity, a hallmark of advanced English communication. Another important theme is balance. People talk about trying to balance work, health, relationships, rest, productivity, hobbies, everything. So you'll hear, I'm trying to find a healthier balance. I tend to overcommit, and I'm working on that. I'm learning not to burn myself out. I'm trying to slow down and be more present. I need to pace myself better. These expressions show awareness and intention. Let's bring in a mini dialogue to illustrate this. How's your new routine going? Pretty well, actually, but I'm still trying to find my rhythm. Yeah, it takes time. Exactly. I'm learning to take things one step at a time. This is completely natural. This is how real people talk. Absolutely. And another interesting aspect of self-improvement language is when people talk about habits they want to start. I've been meaning to read more. I'm trying to get back into journaling. I want to be more organized. I've been thinking about starting therapy. I'm working on being more disciplined. Again, nothing formal here. These are everyday conversational patterns. And then there's the opposite, acknowledging habits they want to break. You'll hear, I'm trying to cut back on screen time. I need to stop procrastinating so much. I've been trying to stop overthinking. I'm working on not being so hard on myself. I'm trying to avoid burning out again. These expressions reflect internal challenges. Now let's talk about one of the biggest themes in personal growth: motivation versus discipline. English speakers talk about this constantly, and they say, motivation comes and goes. You can't rely on motivation. It's all about building systems. Discipline shows up when motivation doesn't. I'm trying to create habits that feel sustainable. Notice how the language is gentle, not strict. Yes. And then there's accountability. Another common topic. People say things like, I need someone to hold me accountable. Tell me to stick to my plan. I do better when I check in with someone. I work better with structure. These phrases aren't just workplace terms, they're deeply personal. Now, let's introduce another highly relevant area: dealing with setbacks. Because no one grows without experiencing setbacks, doubts, and moments of frustration. And the language around this is incredibly useful. Native speakers often say, I hit a rough patch. I lost my motivation. I had a setback, but I'm bouncing back. I slipped up, but I'm not giving up. I'm trying not to be too hard on myself. These expressions are emotionally honest and very common. Exactly. And when someone learns something from a difficult experience, they might say, it taught me a lot. It put things into perspective. It made me rethink things. It helped me grow. It was a wake-up call. Perspective is a huge theme in natural English. Let's wrap up this segment with one more natural dialogue. How's your self-improvement journey going? Honestly, slowly, but I'm making progress. That's all that matters. Yeah, I'm learning to trust the process. Trust the process is incredibly common. It means believing that growth takes time. All right, coming up next, we're going to explore another major topic in advanced English: how people talk about expectations, pressure, ambition, and purpose. This is where language becomes deep, emotional, reflective, and incredibly useful for sounding truly native. All right, let's move into something that every adult in every culture, every job, every stage of life deals with: constantly expectations, pressure, ambition, and purpose. These themes shape how people talk about their lives, their choices, their goals, and their future. And the language native speakers use around these ideas is incredibly rich, nuanced, and emotionally layered. Exactly. And what's important to understand is this: native speakers rarely talk about ambition in a straightforward, textbook way. They don't say things like, "My objective is to achieve my long-term goals." Instead, the language is softer, more personal, more reflective. You'll hear expressions like, "I'm trying to figure out what I really want. I'm still exploring my options. I'm not sure what my next step is. I'm thinking about switching things up. I want to feel excited about what I'm doing." These phrases reveal uncertainty but also openness and curiosity. Right. And when people talk about pressure, the language becomes even more metaphorical. "I feel like there's a lot on my shoulders. I'm carrying a lot right now. I'm holding myself to a high standard. I'm feeling pulled in different directions. I'm trying to manage everyone's expectations." These are very common, very human expressions of emotional weight. And notice how indirect the language is. Native speakers often soften heavy topics. Instead of saying, "I'm stressed because of expectations," they'll say things like, "It's been a little overwhelming lately. I've had a lot on my plate. I'm trying not to get ahead of myself. I'm feeling the pressure a bit." All of these sound natural, relatable, and emotionally aware. Exactly. Now let's talk about ambition, because people approach it differently. Some are goal-driven, others are more relaxed, and many fall somewhere in between. Here's how native speakers express ambition in a natural way. "I've got big plans. I'm aiming higher. I know I'm capable of more. I want to challenge myself. I'm ready for the next chapter." And sometimes ambition is expressed quietly. "I want a life that feels meaningful. I want to do work I'm proud of. I want to feel fulfilled." These phrases show depth without sounding dramatic. Right. And when someone's expectations for themselves are too high, you'll often hear, "I'm being too hard on myself. I'm setting the bar way too high. I need to be more realistic. I'm expecting too much too quickly." These expressions reflect self-awareness and personal growth. Now let's bring in purpose, because in English-speaking cultures, people talk about purpose a lot, not just in spiritual or philosophical ways, but in day-to-day conversations. You'll hear things like, "I want to do something that matters. I'm trying to find what feels right for me. I'm still trying to figure out my purpose. I want to feel like I'm moving in the right direction. I want to contribute to something bigger than myself." Again, not formal, not academic, just real. Exactly. Now let's connect this to something every listener can relate to: the feeling of not knowing if you're doing the right thing. Native speakers talk about this with phrases like, "I'm second guessing myself. I'm not sure if I'm on the right track. I'm questioning a lot of things lately. I'm rethinking my priorities. I'm wondering if I'm heading in the right direction." This language expresses doubt in a soft, relatable way. And here's another big one: "I don't want to settle." This means the person doesn't want to accept something that doesn't feel right: a job, a relationship, a lifestyle. Exactly. And the opposite is, "I'm learning to be okay with where I am." Meaning the person is trying to accept their current situation. Now let's talk about external expectations: what other people expect from you, like family, society, culture, or your workplace. People say, "There's a lot of pressure to succeed. I feel like people expect me to have everything figured out. I'm trying not to live my life for other people. Everyone has opinions about what I should do. I'm trying to block out the noise. Block out the noise means ignoring opinions that aren't helpful. And here's a phrase you'll hear constantly. At the end of the day, this means when you look at what really matters. Often followed by, at the end of the day, I just want to be happy. At the end of the day, it's my decision. At the end of the day, I'm the one living this life. Extremely natural, extremely common. Let's bring in a small natural conversation. You ever feel like you should be further along in life all the time? Yeah, same here. But I'm trying to remind myself that everyone moves at their own pace. Exactly. There's no timeline we have to follow. This kind of conversation happens everywhere: cafes, offices, late-night talks, long walks with friends. Right. And speaking of pace, here's another group of expressions native speakers use constantly when talking about life timing. I'm not in a rush. I'm taking things slow. I'll get there when I get there. I'm moving at my own pace. Things will fall into place. Fall into place means things will work out eventually. Exactly. Now let's shift slightly into fear of failure, because this is one of the biggest emotional themes in English-speaking cultures. People say, I'm afraid of messing things up. I don't want to disappoint anyone. I'm scared of making the wrong choice. I don't want to waste time. I'm worried I'm not good enough. And when someone encourages another person, they might say, you're doing better than you think. Give yourself some credit. You're exactly where you need to be. You'll figure it out. You've got this. These phrases are incredibly common in supportive conversations. And let's also talk about purpose versus expectation, because that's where a lot of emotional language lives. People say, I don't want to live on autopilot. I want a life that feels intentional. I don't want to chase things that don't fulfill me. I'm trying to create a life that feels meaningful. I want to live in a way that actually feels like me. And all of these reflect a modern, personal, introspective way of speaking. Before we wrap this section, here's another natural mini dialogue. How are you doing with everything? Honestly, a little lost, but I'm trying to trust that things will make sense eventually. I get that. Just take it one step at a time. Yeah, I'm working on it. This is exactly how native speakers talk: soft, honest, supportive, real. All right, next we're moving into something just as rich and universal: how people talk about memories, nostalgia, regrets, and lessons learned. This is where English becomes deeply emotional and beautifully expressive, perfect for advanced listening practice. Now let's dive into something a lot of people don't expect to be so rich in natural English: memories, nostalgia, regrets, and the lessons we take from the past. This is an area where native speakers use incredibly expressive, emotional, and nuanced language, sometimes directly, sometimes through humor, sometimes gently, sometimes very openly. Exactly. Because when people talk about their past, whether it's childhood memories, old friendships, big decisions, or mistakes they've made, they shift into a softer, more reflective style of English. And this is one of the most beautiful areas for C2 learners to master, because it shows depth and emotional maturity. Let's start with nostalgia, a powerful feeling that native speakers talk about all the time. You'll hear expressions like, it takes me back. That brings back memories. I haven't thought about that in ages. It feels like a lifetime ago. Those were simpler times. These expressions carry warmth, reflection, and sentimentality. Right. And when someone remembers a specific moment, they might say, I can still picture it like it was yesterday. I remember that so clearly. That moment is still vivid in my mind. These are extremely common in storytelling. Now let's bring in childhood and growing up, because this is one of the most frequent topics for nostalgic conversations. People say things like, I used to spend hours doing that. That was my favorite thing when I was a kid. I miss how carefree life felt back then. We didn't realize how good we had it. I wish I could go back just for a day. These lines show emotional depth but remain conversational. Exactly, and nostalgia isn't always warm, sometimes it's bittersweet. Phrases like, it's funny how things change. Life felt so different then. I didn't appreciate it at the time. I didn't realize how much I'd miss those moments. I wish I had slowed down and enjoyed it more. These reflections appear constantly in movies, podcasts, relationships, and everyday conversations. Now let's shift into regret, not dramatic regret, but the everyday kind that everyone experiences. Native speakers often soften regret using gentle language. If I'm being honest, I wish I'd handled that differently. I should have spoken up. I held myself back. I didn't know any better at the time. I let fear get in the way. Notice how none of these are harsh or self-punishing, they're reflective. Exactly. And sometimes regret is expressed with humor. I made some questionable decisions. I was a mess back then. Let's just say I learned the hard way. These expressions make regret feel relatable rather than heavy. And here's one of the most universal lines. I wish I could have told my younger self. People complete it with things like, I had to be more confident, to worry less, to enjoy the moment, that everything would work out, to stop caring so much about what others think. These ideas appear everywhere in English-speaking culture. Now let's talk about lessons learned because English has an entire category of natural expressions for this. You'll hear, it taught me a lot. It made me stronger. It changed me. It opened my eyes. It shaped who I am. It gave me perspective. These expressions show emotional growth. And then there are phrases used when someone reflects on a difficult moment. At the time, I didn't see the bigger picture. I didn't understand what it meant for me yet. It took me a while to process it. I can see it more clearly now. I needed that experience more than I realized. These expressions show maturity and deep thinking. Exactly, and a very common reflection is, if I hadn't gone through that, I wouldn't be where I am today. This idea appears everywhere in interviews, speeches, conversations with friends. Now let's get into relationships from the past, because the way native speakers talk about old friendships or old partners is incredibly natural. We drifted apart. We lost touch. We went our separate ways. We're on good terms, but not close anymore. We're not in each other's lives the way we used to be. These phrases describe distance gently without drama. Right. And people also talk about reconnection. We reconnected recently. It was nice catching up. It felt like no time had passed. We picked up right where we left off. These expressions show warmth and familiarity. Another very common theme is, I've changed a lot since then, or I'm not the same person I used to be. People often use these lines when reflecting on growth, mistakes, or major life changes. Now let's bring in a mini dialogue that feels completely natural. You ever think about the past and wonder how different things could have been all the time? But then I remind myself that everything led me to where I am now. Yeah, I guess that's true. Honestly, I'm grateful for the lessons, even the hard ones. This tone, reflective, soft, calm, is extremely common in English. Exactly. And speaking of gratitude, let's introduce some language native speakers use when expressing appreciation for the past or for things that shaped them. I'm grateful for that chapter of my life. I'm thankful for the people who supported me. I didn't realize it then, but I see the value now. That experience taught me resilience. I'm a better person because of it. Now let's explore nostalgia through sensory memory, something English speakers do a lot. They connect memories to smells, sounds, weather, or small details. The smell of rain reminds me of home. A certain song can take me back instantly. The sound of summer nights brings back everything. That place carries so many memories. This is emotional, poetic, and very natural. And you'll also hear expressions like, that chapter of my life feels unfinished. I still think about what could have been. Some memories stay with you. Some people leave a mark. These lines show emotional imprint, how the past stays alive in the present. Now let's talk about moving on, because this is another key theme. I've made peace with it. I've let it go. I've grown past that. I'm closing that chapter. I'm ready for a fresh start. These expressions give closure. Before we finish this section, here's one more natural dialogue. You ever regret anything from your past? Of course, but I try not to dwell on it. How do you do that? I try to focus on what I learned instead of what I lost. That's extremely native, calm, thoughtful, grounded. All right, next we're entering another powerful area of advanced English, how people talk about dreams, imagination, creativity, inspiration, and the future. This is where English becomes visionary, expressive, hopeful, and absolutely beautiful for C2 learners to master. Now let's move into a topic that brings out some of the most expressive, imaginative, and uplifting language in English dreams, creativity, imagination, inspiration, and the future. This is where native speakers use hopeful, visionary, forward-looking phrases, the kind of language that helps you not only sound natural, but also inspire others, connect emotionally, and express who you are becoming. Exactly. And one of the most beautiful things about English is how people talk about their dreams, not just goals or ambitions, but the things that spark excitement, curiosity, or possibility inside them. Let's start with some extremely common phrases native speakers use when talking about their dreams. I've always dreamed of doing that. One day, I'd love to make that happen. It's something I've been thinking about for years. I can picture myself doing that someday. I'm not there yet, but I'm working toward it. These phrases feel hopeful but grounded, not overly dramatic, not unrealistic. Right. And you'll also hear a lot of expressions about imagination and curiosity, such as, sometimes I wonder what my life would look like if I tried that. I love imagining different possibilities. It's fun to think about where life might take me. I'm curious to see what the future holds. I like exploring new ideas just to see what sticks. That last one, see what sticks, is a very common idiom. It means trying things to see what works. Exactly. Now let's move into creativity, because creativity shows up everywhere at work, in hobbies, in problem solving, in storytelling, and the language around it is incredibly rich. People say things like, I'm feeling inspired lately. I'm in a creative mood. I hit a creative block. I'm trying to get my creative energy back. I had a sudden spark of inspiration. All of these are extremely natural. And when people talk about starting something new, a project, a hobby, a passion, you'll hear, I've been wanting to try something different. I'm experimenting with new ideas. I'm stepping out of my comfort zone. I'm playing around with some concepts. I'm exploring a new direction. Those expressions show curiosity and courage. Right. And one of the most common modern phrases is, I'm trying to tap into my creativity, meaning access or connect with your creative side. Now let's bring in future-oriented language, because this is one of the areas where advanced English becomes incredibly expressive. People say, I'm excited for what's ahead. I'm hopeful about the future. I feel like good things are coming. I'm ready for a new chapter. I'm open to whatever life brings. These are optimistic, reflective, and very common in English-speaking cultures. And then there's the language of vision, imagining a bigger future for yourself. You'll hear, I see myself growing in that direction. I want to build something meaningful. I have a bigger picture in mind. I'm dreaming bigger these days. I'm planning ahead, but trying to stay flexible. This combination of hope and realism is extremely characteristic of natural English. Let's bring in a natural mini dialogue to illustrate this. So what's next for you? Any big dreams, honestly, yeah. I've been thinking about starting my own thing. Really, that's exciting. Yeah, I'm still figuring it out, but I feel like it's the right direction. That's awesome. You should go for it. Conversations like this happen everywhere. Coffee shops, late night calls, walking home after dinner. Now, let's explore fear and doubt around dreams, because this is just as important. People say, I want to try, but I'm scared. What if I'm not good enough? I don't know if I have what it takes. It's risky, but it feels right. I'm afraid of failing, but I'm more afraid of not trying. That last line is incredibly common in inspirational conversations. Exactly. And when people encourage each other, the language becomes gentle, supportive, and hopeful. You never know what could happen. You owe it to yourself to try. You're more capable than you think. You might surprise yourself. The first step is always the hardest. These expressions lift people up and build courage. Now let's talk about taking action, because dreams stay dreams unless you start moving toward them. Native speakers use expressions like, I'm taking small steps. I've started putting things into motion. I'm doing what I can with what I have. I'm slowly building momentum. I'm making progress. Even if it's slow, these are practical and optimistic. And here's a huge one. I'm not where I want to be yet, but I'm closer than I was. This is one of the most widely used self-growth lines in English. Exactly. Now let's go deeper into the emotional side, feeling stuck, wanting change, or craving something new. People say, I feel like I'm outgrowing my old life. I'm craving change. I need something different. I feel stuck, but I'm trying to move forward. I'm ready for something new. These are extremely common expressions of transition. And then there's the language of possibility, which is some of the most hopeful English you'll ever hear. What if it actually works out? What if this is the start of something great? What if I'm meant for more? What if I surprise myself? What if everything goes right? These questions open up imagination and courage. Now let's add another natural, relatable mini dialogue. You ever feel like you're meant to do something bigger? All the time. What stops you? Mostly fear and overthinking, that makes sense. But maybe the fear means it matters. Yeah, maybe it's worth trying. This is incredibly authentic, the tone, the phrasing, the emotional nuance. Exactly. And before we transition to the final section of the episode, we need to address one more important theme: hope. Because hope, even small, quiet hope, is a powerful part of natural English. People often say, I have a good feeling about this. I'm trying to stay hopeful. I think things will fall into place. I'm keeping an open mind. I believe something good is coming. These aren't dramatic statements. They're everyday expressions of optimism. And here's a final reflective thought before we move to the last chapter. I'm learning that sometimes you don't need to have the whole path figured out. You just need to take the next step. This line is deeply native, deeply human, and deeply real. All right, coming up next is the final section of the podcast, where we bring everything together and end with grounding, reflection, emotional connection, and long-form natural conversation. We're almost there, so we're coming toward the end of this long, reflective journey, but before we wrap up, let's bring everything together. We've talked about routines, stress, boundaries, emotions, relationships, workplace language, self-improvement, ambition, nostalgia, dreams, and the future. And the beautiful thing is that all of these topics share something in common. They reveal how real people speak in real life. Exactly. And the more you listen to these natural rhythms, the more fluent you become not just in vocabulary, but in tone, nuance, emotional expression, and confidence. But before we officially close, let's move into one last area of real-life conversation: how native speakers talk about grounding themselves, finding peace, and staying centered. This is an area filled with soft, calming, authentic language that appears constantly in everyday life. Let's start with some of the most natural expressions people use when they're trying to stay grounded. I'm trying to stay present. I'm focusing on the little things. I'm learning to slow down. I'm taking things as they come. I'm trying not to get caught up in the chaos. These expressions show emotional awareness and perspective. Right. And when people talk about finding clarity, you'll hear phrases like, I need some quiet time to think. I'm trying to clear my head. I need to step back and look at the bigger picture. I'm figuring things out one step at a time. I'm trying to reconnect with myself. These phrases appear constantly in conversations about life balance. Exactly. And let's not forget the language people use when they realize they've been carrying too much. I need to let go of some things. I'm releasing what I can't control. I'm trying to lighten my load. I'm learning to pick my battles. I'm choosing peace. That last one, I'm choosing peace, has become extremely common in modern English. Now let's bring in a natural mini dialogue that captures this kind of emotional grounding. How have you been feeling lately? A bit overwhelmed, honestly. But I'm trying to slow down and breathe. Yeah, I get that. Life can pile up fast. Exactly. I'm learning to take things day by day. It helps. It really does. Be gentle with yourself. This kind of conversation happens every day between close friends, siblings, coworkers, anyone who cares. Now let's bring everything full circle by revisiting something we talked about at the very beginning of the episode: the journey from great English to effortless English. That final stretch of fluency, the last 10%, doesn't come from studying grammar rules or memorizing complex vocabulary. It comes from absorbing natural patterns, like the way people soften their language, the way they express emotions indirectly, the way tone changes meaning, the way simple phrases carry deep feelings, the way humor, hesitation, and small details make conversations feel real. Exactly. And that's why listening to long-form, natural-style conversation like this is so valuable. It trains your ear to recognize not just what is said, but how it's said. And that's the magic of advanced English. You start to pick up on the rhythm. You start to catch the subtle shifts. You start to notice the emotional color behind the words. And eventually, without forcing anything, you start sounding more natural yourself. Right, and before we close, let's talk briefly about connection. Because no matter what language you're learning, every conversation, every expression, every nuance ultimately comes back to connection. People say, I appreciate you being here. It means a lot to me. I'm grateful for this conversation. Thanks for listening. I'm glad we talked. These are the kinds of simple, human sentences that carry real emotional weight. And you'll hear them everywhere because they're universal. Exactly. And speaking of gratitude, let's model a final natural exchange to close this episode. Hey, this was really nice. I enjoyed talking through all of this. Me too. It felt grounding, like a deep breath. Yeah, conversations like this remind me what really matters. Same here. Thanks for showing up. Always. Soft, simple, human, and perfectly natural. Now it's time to wrap things up. To everyone listening, thank you for spending this time with us. Thank you for showing up for your English. Thank you for investing in yourself, your growth, and your fluency. And remember, your progress is real, even if you don't always see it. Every minute you spend listening, absorbing, repeating, and internalizing moves you forward. Fluency isn't just something you achieve, it's something you grow into. Take what you learned today, let it sink in, and keep going. We're proud of you. We believe in you. And we'll see you in the next episode of English in Motion. Thanks for listening, and until next time, take care of yourself.